Hey, how's it going? I found a quotation being attributed to Charles Darwin, and I've seen it quoted on various websites, some white nationalist websites such as Stormfront and Vanguard News Network, as well as on a number of creationist websites. And if you read the quote, you'll see that this quotation, if it had been said by Charles Darwin, it certainly served a purpose for either group of people. In the case of the white nationalist, you'd say, well, this scientific expert on the study of human evolution shows that, yes, blacks in fact are inferior. And creationists will use this quotation as a means to discredit Charles Darwin, saying that, well, this man was obviously a racist, and since he's the founding father of the theory of evolution in modern science, and therefore, if Charles Darwin was a bad person, that is, he was a racist, ergo, evolution is a bad theory. But the thing is that this quote, whenever I've seen it quoted, I've never seen where this quotation actually comes from. See, Charles Darwin was a very prolific writer. He wrote a lot more things than On the Origin of Species. But this quotation, despite the fact that it's repeated in so many places, either on websites or in comment sections to people's videos, articles, whatever, I've never seen what Charles Darwin work this quote comes from. Now, what does it say, in case you don't know already? This quotation says, "Since the dawn of history, the Negro has owned the continent of Africa, rich beyond the dreams of poets' fancy, crunching acres of diamonds beneath his bare black feet, and yet he never picked one up from the dust until a white man showed him its glittering light. His land swarmed with powerful and docile animals, yet he never dreamed a harness, cart, or sled. A hunter by necessity, he never made an axe, spear, or arrowhead worth preserving because beyond the moment of its use, he lived as an ox, content to graze for an hour. In a land of stone and timber, he never sawed a foot of lumber, carved a block, or built a house, save of broken sticks and mud. With league on league of ocean strand and miles of inland seas, for 4,000 years, he watched their surface ripple under the wind and heard the thunder of the surf on his beach. The howl of the storm over his head gazed on the howl of the storm over his head gazed on the dim blue horizon, calling him to worlds that lie beyond, and yet he never dreamed to sail." Now, this quote has been attributed to Charles Darwin, and it's been repeated so often to justify, a particular position on the so-called differences between the races of man, as of course it'll also serve the purpose in an attempt to try to refute Darwin's entire theory of evolution because of his supposed statement by him. And this got me wondering, did Charles Darwin ever say this? So, I have to admit that I have only glanced at the book On the Origin of Species. I know it's in the book, I just never read the thing. And I think that is probably true of most people, even people who have gone to college, unless you had an assignment or something that required you to read the book. And since Darwin was a very prolific author, it is unlikely that you have very many people at all who have read everything he ever wrote, let alone remember it all. So I began a search to find out where this quote had come from, and I figured, well, either maybe it was said out of context, or maybe he was quoting someone else, or of course the possibility existed that he never said it at all. Trying to find this particular quotation source material proved to be a rather daunting task. I could find the quote, but I could never find the source material. One site I went to quoted these words as having been said by the then governor of South Carolina to the Speaker of the South Carolina State House of Representatives back in 1965. The governor is never identified. But you see, in 1865, three people held that office. Andrew Gordon McGrath, who was a Confederate governor, Benjamin Franklin Perry, who was appointed by President Johnson, and later on James Lawrence Orr, who was the first elected governor of South Carolina under their Constitution of 1865. But then, with a bit more diligent searching, I found the actual source material, the actual first quotation of this statement, and it was not by Charles Darwin. It was actually by a man named Thomas F. Dixon Jr., and it came from his book titled "The Klansman: An Historical Romance of the Ku Klux Klan." It was written back in 1905, and it was the second book of a trilogy. It was preceded by the book titled "The Leopard's Spots," and back in 1902, and in 1907, the third in the trilogy titled "The Traitor." The book "The Klansman" later on served as inspiration for the 1915 silent movie by David Llewellyn Wark, D.W. Griffith, titled "The Birth of a Nation." Now, Dixon's family had owned slaves before the Civil War. He himself opposed slavery, but he nevertheless viewed black people with contempt and strongly supported segregation. Now, how do people get away with this saying that Darwin said something that in fact was said by someone else? Well, the fact is that Dixon is outside white nationalist circles and outside of people who study the phenomena of white nationalism. Very few people have probably read Dixon's books, let alone even heard of the guy. So you take a quotation that comes from him and you pass it off as something said by Charles Darwin. While very few people have read Dixon, probably very few people have read everything written by Darwin. So it's easy to pass off something like this, and creationists are going to see this and instantaneously believe it. It's like, aha, Charles Darwin was a racist, ergo he was a bad person, ergo evolution's bad. And white nationalists would take this and, oh, look, this man, this expert in human evolution said all these things about black people, ergo it must be true, and we're right. Well, no, you're not right, because he said something like this, because he didn't say something like this. So it was said by Charles F. Dixon Jr. and passed off as having been said by Charles Darwin. Now, actually Thomas Dixon, I should say, not Charles Dixon. So I posted this on my Blogspot account. And for some reason, somebody on 4chan posted the link to my article in the discussion boards. I don't know what all was said about it, but I got like 100 or so hits on the blog, and I checked my blog this morning and I was like, oh my God, look at all these hits on this one article. And then of course I found the source, and it came from 4chan. So I don't know what they were saying, but I did get a few comments. And one of these people said, you cannot dispute that this statement is true, as true today as it was 150 years ago. Well, yeah, I can actually. Okay, let's start off from the beginning, shall we? Let's see. Since the dawn of history, the Negro has owned the continent of Africa. No. The Negro, or the black person, has not owned the continent of Africa. Yeah, you've had black kingdoms in the southern part of the continent, but in the northern parts you've had, oh God, you've had Arabs, Copts, Phoenicians. Phoenicians, of course, started the Carthaginian Empire, the Greeks, and the northern Coptic people. That was Egypt. And, you know, you've had these groups, of course, the Tuaregs, people who live in the northern part of Africa. They were originally, I believe, from Western Asia. They migrated down into Africa. Now, they didn't own the continent. They shared the continent, yes, and they had kingdoms in the continent, but they were not, you know, from north to south, east to west, the undisputed, you know, owners of the continent of Africa. That is simply untrue. Crunching acres of diamonds beneath his bare black feet, yet he never picked one up from the dust until a white man showed him its glittering light. Well, um, I've never heard of any place where you could walk around and just pick diamonds up off the ground. Now, this is possible. I mean, considering geological activity, you could push certain things up to the surface, things like gold, right? But typically, diamonds are found underground. You have to dig for them typically. And I don't know where you could possibly find any place in Africa that you could just walk around casually and reach down and pick up diamonds off the ground. And besides, without the technology and the tools to cut and shape the diamonds themselves would have been useless to the Africans. I mean, let's face facts. It was the black African kingdoms in the southern part of Africa that supplied gold to the northern parts of Africa. Much of the gold, for example, in Greece and Rome ended up, coming from Africa, from the Black Kingdom. So that's, yeah, they understood the value of gold just fine. No problem with that. Diamonds, no real use to them. They couldn't cut and shape it. They could, of course, cut and shape gold. Let's see here. Oh, this has got to be the stupidest statement. His land swarmed with powerful and docile animals, yet he never dreamed a harness, cart, or sled. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Really? Okay. Black Africans had cattle, all right? And there are some African societies today that wealth is measured in how many heads of cattle you possess. The Africans were also the first to domesticate the donkey. No problem. They never domesticated the zebra. I don't know why that would be. But powerful and docile animals, I really hope that these guys are not talking about the African elephant, because you can't domesticate the African elephant. I mean, even today, we can't domesticate the African elephant. We can domesticate the Indian elephant. Oh yeah, we can do that. And people in Asia have domesticated that elephant for centuries. The African elephant, you cannot domesticate it. People have tried, people have failed, and they're too dangerous, they're too unpredictable. Okay. Another animal that is big and powerful, but certainly not docile, is the rhinoceros and, of course, the hippopotamus. Now, one species of cattle that is a resident of the African continent is called the Cape buffalo. You can't domesticate. No, you can't domesticate it. People have tried and people have failed. And the Cape buffalo is known to the Africans who live in that area as the widowmaker. You try to pet it, think it's a harmless little cow, thing will fucking kill you, man. It's dangerous. And so I really don't understand how it is this land supposedly swarming with these powerful and docile animals. What are the Africans supposed to have done with these things? Domesticate them? We can't domesticate them now, right? Moving on, let's see. A hunter by necessity, he never made an axe, spear, or arrowhead worth preserving beyond the moments of its use. Oh no, actually, you see, much of human society went from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age and then up to the Iron Age. In Africa, they went from the Stone Age to the Bronze and Iron Age at the same time. They learned how to fashion bronze and iron tools and weapons and all these other things, all in one shot. They took two separate ages and combined them together. And I bet you didn't know this. The first people in the world to turn iron into steel were the Haya people of Tanzania. Black Africans were the first people in the world to turn iron into steel. And they even had an experiment in that. Another one here. In a land of stone and timber, he never sawed a foot of lumber, carved a block, or built a house save of broken sticks and mud. Now, you've got to be kidding me. The city of Benin, which is part of Black Africa, they have these walls around Benin City, which were destroyed later by the British. But these were huge, massive stone walls that the Benin people, or the people who lived in Benin at the time, began constructing in 800 AD, about 900 years before the founding of the United States. And there are stone structures in the southern part of Africa. The people of Africa, when they built structures, built typically with what they had on hand, just like people did all around the world. But the people of Benin were building a massive stone wall around their city when the people in much of Europe and in Britain were living in homes made of twigs and animal manure mud. All right, so the people in Africa were building stone structures. They were. Oh boy, let's see. With league on league of ocean stranded miles of inland seas, for 4,000 years he watched their surface ripple under the wind, heard the thunder of the surf on his beach, the howl of the storm over his head, gazed on the dim blue horizon calling him to worlds that lie beyond, and yet he never dreamed to sail. Yeah, he dreamed to sail. He did. He dreamed to sail. Of course, it would have been damned hard for the people of Axum, which is located in Ethiopia, to do the trading they were doing with India and the Somalis carrying out trade with the island of Sri Lanka without ocean-going vessels. They did these things. The Swahili kingdoms in the south did trade in ancient times with China. And let's see what else. The Mali Empire had a pretty big navy that sailed off the coast of Western Africa. And there are some people who think that the Mali Empire could have sent ships across the Atlantic Ocean and landed in pre-Columbian North America. Oh, and by the way, getting back to the point about never sawed a foot of lumber, carved a block. Recently in Nigeria, well, actually a few years ago in Nigeria, they found an 8,000-year-old canoe that had been carved out of African mahogany. They did carve out canoes from trees. It's the material they had at hand. So people who first you want to attribute this to Charles Darwin, and then you find out that Charles Darwin never said any such thing. And then they try to pass this stuff off as, well, it's true no matter who said it. No, it's not. Now, I'm not going to say that all of Africa was this golden paradise and that everyone lived, wearing silks and gold and all this other stuff. That is untrue. The civilizations in Africa varied as much as the civilizations in Europe and Asia and everywhere else, because people are people, okay? And, well, with all that misinformation circulating about Charles Darwin and this, quote that's misattributed to him, I decided that I was going to clear the air. Thank you very much for watching. You guys take care of yourselves.